guitarist has that one dream axe they think will change their life. The holy grail that promises instant tone, mojo, and street cred. But here's the hard truth. Some of those so-called legendary guitars are more hype than substance. They're marketed as if picking one up will make you Clapton, Slash, or Hendrix overnight. In reality, you might just end up with back pain, tuning problems, and a hole in your wallet big enough to drive a tour bus through. Let's talk about the most overrated guitar in history. Now, don't get me wrong, this guitar has been on some of the greatest records of all time. It's iconic, it looks killer under the lights, and it's become a symbol of rock and roll itself. But just because it's iconic doesn't mean it's perfect. Far from it. The price tag alone has scared off more players than it's inspired. And the quirks, oh man, the quirks could fill a whole album. Tuning instability, weight that feels like strapping on a bowling ball to your neck, fragile headstocks that snap if you look at them sideways. Sound familiar? Yeah, I'm talking about the Gibson Les Paul. Fans will come for me in the comments, but somebody's got to say it. The Les Paul might just be the most overrated guitar of all time. Does it sound good? Absolutely. Can it be a game changer in the right hands? No doubt. But is it worth the hype, the headaches, and the insane price tags? That's where the debate starts. And honestly, a lot of it boils down to nostalgia and marketing. Today, I'm pulling no punches. We're going to break down why the Les Paul is both legendary and flawed, why guitarists keep buying into the myth, and what alternatives might actually give you more bang for your buck. Because chasing hype won't make you a better player, but finding the right tool for you just might. The most overrated guitar in history is also the most worshipped. What are the hype? What is the deal with the Les Paul? Man, look, man, ever since I got my first Les Paul, and this had to have been probably, I don't know, probably around 75, 76. And before that, I had gotten a Gibson Les Paul. It was my first nice electric guitar. And the Gibson Les Paul I've talked about on this channel. It was an all walnut, sort of Les Paul shaped guitar, but it was a budget guitar. And at some point, I had scraped together some money from working in the restaurant and doing different things. And I scraped together $500. And I saw a Les Paul custom. Yes, I'm an old dude because I could buy a real Gibson Les Paul custom in the 70s for $500. And I would later learn that it was a second. It had a 2 on the back of the headstock, but none of that mattered to me. It was the coolest guitar, probably the coolest Les Paul I'll ever own. I may never own another Les Paul custom, but I will say this right now in all transparency. Probably the one guitar I miss the most is that Les Paul custom. And I very foolishly in the 80s traded it for a Yamaha or Ibanez bass, because I thought, well, I need this bass to record my demos. And yeah, I don't need the Les Paul anymore. The stupidest thing I've ever done in my life. That was a magical guitar. It had my own DNA in it, because at one point the pickup cover on the neck pickup had broken, and I had taken super glue and glued it back, together, and I had removed the covers from the pickups, and I'd done so many things to that guitar and played that guitar so much, and it was an amazing guitar, right? My first really nice. That's a Les Paul Custom is considered the tuxedo model of Les Pauls. But look, man, the reality is this. They are very expensive. And look, I can honestly say that my whole time on the Sunset Strip, yes, there were bands like Guns N' Roses that brought the Les Paul back, but largely what people were playing in the 80s, late 80s and middle 80s and everything out in LA, everybody was playing Super Strats. Everybody was playing Charvel. Everybody was playing Jackson. And it took a band like Guns N' Roses and an iconic player like Slash to bring the Les Paul back. And I can remember going into Guitar Center way back then and seeing they had a purple Les Paul at the Guitar Center on Ventura Boulevard. And I'd stare at that guitar and go, man, I wish and even then, and I think maybe the price back then was like $1,200. And it just seemed like the most impossible purchase to make because, man, back in those days, if you had a day gig, you might make $300 a week. You had to pay your rent. You had to pay for groceries, gas, all of those things. In a $1,200 guitar, it just seemed completely out of reach because it would take about a month and a half to have the money to be able to buy that. So I never got to play a Les Paul again. I never owned a Les Paul again until flash forward to probably about 2001 when I scraped together $1,200 and bought a tobacco-stained, and I mean by tobacco-stained, not tobacco-stained finish, tobacco sunburst, but a guitar that had been in somebody's house that was literally, it smelled like they'd been chain smoking budget gas station cigarettes, so much so that the guitar had yellowed. There was no getting that stink out of the guitar. And that was, I believe at that time, I think that was a Les Paul Classic. It had the greenish tinted inlays and all that. And I used to play that guitar at a blues bar in Nashville. And man, it took that many years. You figure I was out in LA from 86 to 94. And then I was in Nashville from 94 to, till I left in 2024. Right. And, it took me, a good, probably 7 years or so before I was able to purchase another Les Paul, and they were always out of reach. They were always out of reach for a musician that's playing at the club level. Let's be real. I mean, as far as a lot of the music that I was playing at the time, it was still lent itself to a Super Strat as opposed to playing a Les Paul, which does certain things amazingly well. You can definitely get a great jazz sound on the neck pickup on a Les Paul. You can get a great funk sound in the in-between position with a clean tone. And of course, that bridge pickup will give you all the rock and roll you can dish out. But man, there is no denying that it is very cost prohibitive. Now, a lot of why we love the Les Paul is rock gods made it famous, so we think it's magic. But is it any more magic than any of these guitars I have in this room? Absolutely not. In fact, maybe PRS these days with their 594, and you can get the single cut version, maybe they do a better job at making something that, here's the deal, the flaws with the Les Paul, the way this neck is designed here, if this were to fall over this way, even in its case, a lot of times the necks will break on a Gibson. And look, they've tried different things like putting a volute and different, sort of neck, where it connects right here. And people want the tradition. People want the original design, but the original design is clunky, it's heavy, and yes, you have that issue with the neck. And then the other thing is, it always seems like whenever I play a Les Paul, and yes, this one is dreadfully dusty, but it always seemed like I spend half the night tuning the damn thing. And that can be a pain in the ass, man. There's nothing better than getting a guitar that stays in tune, that plays, well all night. That's not, this guitar right here is probably about 9 pounds. That's a lot to carry on your shoulders for 4 sets. What would I like to see? What would I like to see Gibson do? I would like to see him work on something here. Make a neck that's put a couple steel bolts or something in there to make this more solid. I would like a completely hollowed out Les Paul, completely hollowed out except for this strip. I would call it like the player, the Les Paul player. I would put the bolt here or something here to make this more solid. I would put locking tuners. I would make sure, look, a lot of issues with the Les Paul is the way the nut's cut. If the nut is cut well, tuning issues can be better, right? But look, the thing about PRS guitars, and I will say this, they always seem to be improving on their design. Les Pauls, on the other hand, yes, they've got the Les Paul Modern with a better cutaway, and some of them have locking tuners and different things, but I don't feel the same amount of innovation by Gibson for refining what this is and what this does. It's a great guitar, and like I said, rock gods made it famous. We think it's magic. It's really only magic players. Now, price tag madness. Les Pauls are crazy expensive, and every now and then, you could buy one used and find a good deal. Models like the Les Paul Traditional, the Les Paul Classic, some of those models, if you peruse certain used sites, you can find deals on them. Of course, if you find one that's had a previous neck break and it's got a good repair, you can save a lot of money that way. And I think every player that aspires to be in the studio or a top call live player or whatever, everybody has to own one of these. You have to own this. You could probably, if all you did was record at home and nobody ever saw what you played, I could probably just play that 594 over there that happens to be a double cut, so it doesn't look as much like a Les Paul, but I could probably play that in place of my Les Paul all day and all night. It's going to stay in tune better. It's going to sound great. It's going to feel good. But you know what? If you take a guitar into a studio and they want a Les Paul, well, guess what? It better say Les Paul on the headstock. Now, the reality is, yes, a Les Paul sounds good, but so do way cheaper guitars. You could get into the PRS SE single cut, and those can be had for like $8.99, even less in the used market. Or you could get an Epiphone. Epiphone these days, has offerings that have the Gibson headstock, have custom Bucker pickups, which in all reality, a lot of the mojo of the custom shop Les Paul guitars, in addition to the attention to detail and the more expert craftsmanship, a lot of the mojo is in the pickups. And so buying an Epiphone with custom Bucker pickups and using that as your option for a Les Paul is a certainly way more affordable option. The Les Paul is a legend, but legends get exaggerated over time. So here's the verdict. The Gibson Les Paul is both iconic and overrated. It's a paradox, and that's why the debate never dies. On one hand, you've got the sound that defined generations, the warm, fat sustain, the crunchy roar through a Marshall stack. You can't deny the fingerprints it's left on music history. But on the other hand, you've got a guitar that fights you as much as it inspires you. It's heavy, it's fragile, and it costs more than most musicians can realistically afford. That's not inspiration. That's marketing genius mixed with nostalgia. Here's the thing. Being overrated doesn't mean it's bad. It means it doesn't live up to the myth that's been built around it. People expect a Les Paul to instantly transform them into Jimmy Page or Joe Perry, and when it doesn't, they either blame themselves or choose more gear. That's the trap. And meanwhile, players with $500 Epiphones or $1,200 PRSs are out there crushing gigs, sounding just as good, and saving their backs from chiropractor bills. The truth is, tone lives in the hands, not the headstock logo. I've seen master players with gold out of pawn shop specials, and I've seen hobbyists drown under the weight of a $5,000 Les Paul custom. Gear matters, sure, but hype doesn't play the notes. You do. So yeah, the Les Paul is probably the most overrated guitar in history. Not because it's bad, but because the legend has outgrown the reality. And that's okay. Legends are supposed to inspire us, but don't let the legend trick you into thinking you need that guitar to be great. You don't. You need practice, passion, and a guitar that feels right in your hands. At the end of the day, the Les Paul is a symbol, not a solution. And symbols can be beautiful, but they can also blind us. My advice, play what works for you, not what marketing tells you is the holy grail. If that happens to be a Les Paul, more power to you. But if it's not, guess what? You're in good company. Some of the greatest tones ever recorded didn't come from the most overrated guitar in history. They came from players who made their guitars sing, no matter the brand.